Hey friends, it's me again. You know what's really easy to do and even easier to forget? Help me out and hit that like button if you're listening on YouTube. If you're listening somewhere else, what the hell? Pop in and give me a thumb. Say hi while you're at it. Helps me a ton with that damn algorithm. And besides, it's always nice to see you there. Alright then, let's hop on that crazy train. All aboard! Oh, shit. Hey, welcome back, friend. A notable day indeed here at Casa de Blood. The end of slavery and the beginning of season 11. It's a big Juneteenth premiere. And that said, I think it's only appropriate that I free Chester. That's right, fella. You're emancipated now. Go with God. Well, don't say I didn't offer. Anyway, come on in, friend. I just can't shake this scaly prick. Please, for the love of God, sign up over at Rumble and subscribe to us there to get all my shows on time. They're also on time on the podcast feed, so feel free to subscribe on your favorite podcast app. Also, visit simplyscarypodcast.com and click the patrons link in the menu at the top of the screen and join for as little as $7.99 a month. You'll get access to their entire audio archive, all ad-free and available to download or stream. All the above helps the network that I happen to work for. YouTube sadly does not. Also, feel free to visit me over at patreon.com/TrueBlood if you'd like. That helps me personally. Anyway, tonight we welcome back our old pal Frederick Pangborn. Fred is no longer with us, but his brother Robert Pangborn has been kind enough to help us keep Fred's legacy alive. And as long as we're here, he will be too. In this one, a tree farmer's quiet season takes a turn when one of his workers goes missing, and what's hiding in the forest turns out to be something no one was prepared for. So without further delay, from author Frederick Pangborn, I give you, come out, wherever you are. The rising flames were alive as they reached up high into the night sky. A spectacular display of flaming illumination that desperately reached up to touch the stars. The entire perimeter was now connected and sealed off by the wall of fire, all except the front portion which I had intentionally left open. It would need an escape route, and it would be here where I would be waiting. I sat on the back of the Ford, the shotgun resting across my lap, as I patiently waited for it to make its escape from the hellish trap I had sprung. I took a drag off my cigarette and shifted on the tailgate of the truck. Yeah, it was only a short matter of time before we would finally confront each other. "Remember those noises that woke everyone up last week?" asked Ingram from behind me. I was in the process of changing the plugs in an old John Deere riding mower in the storage shed. Though the new one was working fine, I had given the old one a bit of renovation and some much-needed maintenance, just to get her up and running again. A new air and fuel filter were fitted last week, and today a basic lube job and fresh plugs. "You mean those cannon shots that shook my house?" I replied as I continued working. "You and everyone else in a 10-mile radius?" "Well, I was just down at the hardware store, and Miller said that the newspaper chalked that up to some meteorites that probably didn't burn up and fell close to here during that meteor shower we got." Ingram leaned up against one of the shed doors, his arms folded across his chest. Ingram and I had gone to high school together back in the day here in town, and when I decided to try my hand at running a tree farm, he was the first person I asked to be my right-hand man. The school was predominantly white with the exceptions of Ingram and 2 other students. He was a great guy all in all, got nicest to know in the senior yearbook. "Is that so?" I said as I loosened up an old plug with a socket wrench. I guess that's as good of an answer as any. That first bang damn near caused me to fly out of bed. Jeff woke up hollering. Christ, they were loud. You need a hand? He inquired. No, I've got this last plug and I'm done here. You get the oil? Yeah. Where's Gary at? He should be out there on the other mower in the forest. We referred to the 1 acre of farmland used for raising the trees as the forest. Rows and columns of roughly 1,500 pines, spruces, and firs are grown in that patch of land. Jeffrey, my 8-year-old son, and I always enjoyed walking amongst the lines of trees and looking down the seemingly endless columns of symmetrically aligned trees stretching off as far as you could see. It was like something out of Alice in Wonderland. Guess I'll go see how he's coming along then, Ingram said, with a hint of boredom. Okay, sounds good. I'll be out there in a minute or two, I said as I tossed the old plug into a trash can nearby. When Ingram disappeared from the open shed doors, I tried to think of any chores beside the grass out in the forest needing to be cut that I could present to the man to keep him busy, but there wasn't much to do. We still had another month and a half before some of the trees needed to be cut and shipped off. Until then, though, there wasn't a hell of a lot going on. I found myself putzing around in the shed more times than most, trying to occupy my time. Once the new plugs were all in place, I pulled up a stool at the workbench and found myself looking over the 3 chainsaws that were lined up at the end of the bench. I tried to recall when they were last sharpened. I wasn't sure how long I sat there going over the chainsaws when Ingram came rushing back. Run! He shouted before he had even reached the shed. The urgency in his voice quickly pulled my attention from the steel saws and off the stool. I met him at the open doors. What's up? From the worried look on his face, I knew it wasn't good. It's Gary, Ryan. He's gone. I went out to the forest and the mower was still running with no one on it. It ran into a tree and was just sitting there. I went to turn it off and there was blood on the seat. Something happened to him and I can't find him. Shit! Come on. We both trotted off the hill where the shed and my home sat and down the dirt road to the entrance of the forest. I had hired Gary last year to give Ingram a hand around the farm when I threw my back out trying to lift the trailer by myself and not bending my legs. Always lift with your legs, they say. Gary was a tall, overweight kid who graduated from high school about 6 months ago. Likeable kid, though. Hard worker and never complained. He was nerdy like Ingram, too. Not like those guys from that Revenge of the Nerds movie back in the 80s, but always talking about those fantasy and sci-fi flicks. They would sit around critiquing and analyzing every detail about them. I wasn't big into those types of movies, so I could never really relate to their conversations. I followed Ingram through the entrance to the forest and to the left into the columns of 6-foot trees. As we quickly made our way past row after row, I could see the bright green and yellow riding mower ahead with its front end nestled in the base of a pine's lower branches. By the time we stopped jogging, we were both sucking wind, and I, for one, was glad I only owned 1 acre and not 10. See? Stated Ingram as he pointed to the black cushioned seat between breaths. I moved around the opposite end to look. Across the seat and on the steering wheel was a thick splash of red. It looked as though someone had stuck a large paintbrush in a can of crimson paint and flung the red liquid at the mower. I touched the blood with the tip of my middle finger and studied it as I rubbed the redness between my fingers. I looked about and scanned the immediate area. It was then I caught sight of Gary's worn, grease-smeared Dallas Cowboys baseball cap on an uncut portion of grass several feet away. It too was splashed red as I lifted it and turned it over in my hand. What the fuck? I said in a harsh whisper. Let's split and look around, Ingram suggested as he turned and vanished behind one of the rows. Still holding onto the hat, I turned down the next row, and almost simultaneously, we began calling out his name. As Ingram went off further down toward the farm's far end, I circled around the next column over and walked back toward the front, retracing the tractor's path. I was calling for Gary and surveying the grounds when I came upon a most peculiar discovery. It was a good 20 feet away from where the mower was now stationed that I spotted the hole. Between two trees was a hole in the ground that appeared to be where another tree was planted and somehow uprooted. From the look of the unearthed soil, it looked as though the tree had been removed recently. This was of course impossible since the trees within the forest are spaced out equally. It was as if an odd tree was planted in between two of the set ones and then uprooted, which was also quite impossible without the use of heavy machinery. It looked like it had been removed not long ago. I had been through the farm on more occasions than I could count and never recalled seeing an odd tree planted out of sync. The day was starting off on a bizarre note. After finding no evidence of Gary's whereabouts or what had transpired with the odd tree, I made my way back to where Ingram had walked to. I found him at the very end of the farm's edge, wiping his hands off on his pant legs. "Anything? Not a trace of them," he replied, and pointed to a section of the wooden three-rail split fence that surrounded the forest, which separated it from a real forest of hundreds of square acres that enveloped my farm. 10 feet from the fence, we had dug out a fire break separating the real forest from the farm by a strip of open space. "One railing was knocked loose. By the scratches on the wood, it looked like some animal tried crawling through the fence and knocked the railing off. I just set it back in the post." "Some animal?" I repeated as I walked closer and studied a portion of fence that Ingram was pointing out. There were indeed marks clawed deep into the railing. "What do you suppose made that?" "Only thing around these parts would be a black bear." At the mention of a bear, I instinctively looked over my shoulder. A bear possibly in the forest and Gary missing, leaving behind only blood, was an equation with an ominous sum. Ingram must have seen my nervousness and said in a false reassurance, "Well, I don't see any tracks or imprints in the grass, so maybe when it was pushing through the fence, the railing fell off and scared it. It took off back into the woods." I looked down at the blood-streaked hat still in my hand. "I think we should head back to the shed. Give the sheriff a call. Let him and his boys figure all this out. Come on." When we got back to the storage shed, I used the phone in there to report Gary missing and told them of the blood. They sent 2 patrol cars and an unmarked car over 20 minutes later. Before their arrival, I called my wife Carrie at her job at the town library and gave her a brief rundown on what was going on here, in case the deputies were still here when she got home. I kept my summary of the situation to a minimum, telling her Gary had simply wandered off and that we were worried. I would fill her in with more details later. No sense in sending her into panic mode while she was at work. A young deputy in his mid-20s took statements from Ingram and I, while the other 3 were going over the scene where the mower was. A couple of guys in plain clothes and blue windbreakers with the word Sheriff Deputy spelled out across the back were photographing the area and collecting samples. They wrapped up everything they could do for the moment just after noon. On their way out, they took the mower on a trailer hitched to a township SUV, along with the ball cap. Both were to be analyzed further and in more depth down at the station. I was told I'd have the mower back by the end of the week. When I mentioned the fence and if they'd found any bear tracks, I was told that nothing pertaining to a bear was discovered inside the farm itself when they did their sweep of the area. Ingram's theory of the animal being scared off by the dislodged railing was now forming into a plausible explanation, but still it did not explain Gary's current whereabouts. After they had all packed up and left to the station in town, I went into the house and grabbed 2 cold beers from the fridge and sat on the tailgate of the old Ford with Ingram. As we drank, we looked out at the forest in silence, each lost in our own private thoughts. I contemplated if I should have mentioned anything to the deputies or Ingram about the hole between the trees. It seemed insignificant now compared to what was going on. Though neither of us mentioned that the disappearance of Gary unsettled us enough that we didn't want to do any more work, we decided to call it a day. Ingram suggested we go hit Maggie's pub in town for a few more beers, but I reluctantly decided against it. Figured it would be best if I stayed and told Carrie what happened while I was sober and not 3 sheets to the wind. I told him to ask me again tomorrow and I'd take him up on it. I would go inside and take a long hot shower and try to shake this depression that was hanging over me like a dejected umbrella. Though neither Ingram nor myself were in any way responsible, it sure as hell felt like I was. Once back in the house and Ingram was in his Jeep and down the road, I polished off 2 more beers and hit the shower in our bedroom upstairs. God, that shower felt good. I stood there letting the hot water cascade off me as my body slipped into a profound state of relaxation. Between the beers, the hot shower, and being mentally drained by the afternoon's unexplained incident, I fell onto the bed's comforter with nothing but a towel around my waist and fell into a deep sleep. Something pulled me from the dark, tranquil waters of sleep that I had been submerged in. I lifted my head, still dazed from being abruptly awakened, and looked at the clock radio next to the bed. 3:44. I had been knocked out for a good hour and change. I sat up and rubbed my face. The sound that had initially awakened me came again. It was Jeffrey outside laughing in a high-pitched shrill, and Carrie calling to him. She must have seen me fast asleep and decided to let me rest, taking Jeffrey outside to play. God bless her. Jeffrey didn't get out of school until 2:30, so they must have gotten home not too long ago. I threw on a pair of faded jeans and moved to one of the windows to see what they were doing. They weren't at the side of the house. The yard there was void of anyone. I heard Carrie calling for him again and moved to the next window facing the back of the house. The backyard was also empty, and my gaze moved further out toward the entrance of the forest. Nothing at first. Then I caught a quick glimpse of Jeffrey running between the trees, his bright red shirt boldly giving away his position against the greenery. I smiled as a game of hide-and-seek amongst the trees was taking place. It was a popular game with him that Carrie and I both participated in. My smile rapidly vanished, though, as the day's earlier events came back to me with the crashing reality of what had transpired. The mower in the tree, the bloodied cap, and clawed fence. I yelled their names through the screen, but no one answered. In nothing but those faded jeans, I rushed from the bedroom and down the stairs. I exploded through the screen door out back, almost sending it from its hinges as I leapt from the back porch, skipping all 5 steps. I yelled out their names again as I ran onto the dirt road into the forest. I hardly felt the jutting stones underneath my bare feet as I ran down the road and onto the grass within the realm of pines, firs, and spruces. I stopped between the first set of tree columns and listened for their voices. My panting, as my lungs sucked in the much-needed air, was louder than any distinct voices that I tried to uncover. I began to walk down the first column as my breathing began returning to normal, glancing down each row as I passed. I called out Carrie's name, then Jeffrey's. Nothing. I called out again as I made my way further back into the trees. I must have been about a quarter of the way deep into the forest when I heard a faint sobbing coming from my left. I stopped and tried to pinpoint the exact direction from where it came. I cut through a couple more columns, and the sobs gained in volume. It was Jeffrey. "Jeff!" I called out as I moved through another column. Suddenly, his red shirt became visible near the base of one of the pines. He was curled up in a ball, partially hidden beneath the lower branches of pine needles. "Jeff!" I said as I rushed to him. Dropping to one knee, I gently slid him out from the confines of the tree. When I turned him over, I saw thin streaks of red across his tear-covered face. Speckles of blood dotted his blonde hair. "What happened? Are you hurt? Where's Mommy?" I bombarded him with inquiries as I gave him a quick going over, searching for any type of wound. He appeared unscathed. "Where's your mom at, Jeff?" There was no answer given. Instead, he leapt into my arms. His arms wrapped themselves tightly around my neck. His sobs intensified as he clung to me. It's okay, buddy," I whispered and lifted him up as I stood. I looked around the immediate area. "Carrie!" I yelled. Nothing. I called again as I started to walk with Jeffrey still in my arms. "Carrie!" My bare foot touched something beside the soft grass. Carrie's glasses. Reaching down with one hand still cradling Jeff, I used my free one to pluck the glasses up. One arm was bent at an unwearable angle, and blood coated one lens. My lips tightened and quivered. An image of Gary's bloodied cap appeared in my mind. This can't be happening, I told myself. I looked around for any more evidence, and that's when I saw the hole. Or should I say, another hole. Just like the other one, it was oddly out of place in between trees and recently made. Something moved behind me, and I whirled around fast, nearly throwing Jeffrey from my arms. A few rows away, I caught sight of branches moving in the trees as if someone were moving through them. I called out weakly, "Carrie!" The distant treetops swayed as though something was pushing through them and moving further away. I slowly followed. I shoved my way between the trees, cutting through the rows while branches slapped across Jeff's back and my face. I called out Carrie's name every 5 or 6 steps as I pushed forward. Stopping between columns, I looked about, trying to get an idea as to where in the forest I was. My mind was racing with 1,000 different thoughts, and at times I found myself forgetting where I was or the actions I was performing. I switched Jeffrey from one arm to the other as they were aching from his weight. What to do? I questioned myself. Do I bring Jeff back inside and call the sheriff's department again while leaving Carrie perhaps wounded out here alone? Or do I continue trudging through the trees in hopes of finding her? My mind was drowning in a swirling pool of questions. My eyes began to tear up as a feeling of total helplessness fell over me. I could no longer deal with this situation alone. I turned in the direction of the house and walked. I made it perhaps 50 feet when I was struck. At first, it seemed as if a tree had crashed into me, sending me sprawling across the grass. The impact sent Jeffrey flying from my arms and into the grass. In an instant, I scurried back to my feet and searched for him. The bear from the fence was now back in the forest and attacking. I needed to find Jeffrey, protect him from the animal's assault. I saw him sitting there, his hands behind him, holding himself up. He was looking at something with the most frightful look I have ever seen upon his youthful face. I turned to see what could have terrified him like that, and when I did, I too donned the same dreadful mask. The shape that emerged from the line of trees was not a bear, but something else that was beyond description. A squirming mass that resembled a repulsive combination of tree, insect, and squid, all melded together in a sickly abomination that moved on long insect-like legs. Appendages of multiple sizes and shapes squirmed about inside the tree's branches as it moved from the column of trees toward Jeffrey. I screamed at it as if that would stop it, but instead a long spear-like limb shot forth from the crawling mass and impaled my son where he sat. A puzzled look fell upon his face as he struggled to comprehend what had just happened. I fell to my knees and screamed his name as loud as I could, as the pointed end of the limb had penetrated him completely, exiting his back and then opening like an umbrella without its cloth. In a violent jerk, the limb was retracted, the open umbrella end hooking into him, and Jeff was yanked from where he sat and into the body of the thing. Branches, insect limbs, and tentacles all closed around him as it pulled him into the mass. I could only reach out with my hand as the thing on its long praying mantis-like legs quickly scuttled back into the trees and away from the scene, leaving one of Jeffrey's sneakers in the blood-stained grass behind. I quickly stood and ran into the trees, screaming Jeffrey's name. Row after row I blindly stormed through, branches clawing at my bare skin as I ran. I ran in no set direction, for I knew not where the thing had gone, and I darted from one angle to another. In the end, I found myself lying face down in the grass, exhausted and inevitably alone. I was mentally shutting down. Whatever that thing was, it had taken my family from me in a matter of minutes and eluded me amongst the trees in my own farm. My emotions, like a metronome, swayed from blood-boiling anger to self-pity and defeat as I laid there in the grass. Lifting myself on unsteady limbs, I started making my way back to the house. The way I felt now, I prayed that the thing would leap from behind the trees and take me as it did my wife and child. It did not, though. I walked like some mindless zombie from the forest and up the dirt road, with my only wounds being scratches from the tree branches. As I walked up the dirt road, a sensation of tranquility washed over me, and it was while in this state of calmness that a plan assembled. I made a beeline to the shed and called Maggie's pub. Ingram was still there. I didn't divulge the gruesome details I had witnessed, but simply said, "There's something in the forest. It took Carrie and Jeff. I need you here." I scanned the interior of the storage shed and eyed a few items amongst the equipment that had lain strewn about that I would need to piece together this plan I had conceived. Nodding with satisfaction, I walked up to the house. Ingram would be here soon. The grandfather clock in the living room read 6:03 when I heard the door to Ingram's Jeep slam shut outside. I had a fully loaded 12-gauge Remington shotgun leaned up against the couch and was sliding a SIG 9mm into my waistband when Ingram came through the front door. Before he could bombard me with a barrage of questions, I had him sit down on the couch. I couldn't sit at this point and stood by the fireplace as I retold the previous events that had taken place after he left. When I had finished telling him the impossible, he just sat there slack-jawed, his eyes staring. I'm sorry, Ryan. I just need a minute to soak all this in. He leaned back in the couch cushions and took on the look of a man trying to mentally solve a complex math problem. He sat back up once he had finished sorting through whatever mental obstacles were obstructing his thoughts. I'm going to go way out on a limb here, so bear with me. Plus, take into consideration that I've had a few beers in me already, he said as he prepared to propose his insight on what I had told him. Go ahead. Okay, I'm really reaching on this now, so again, bear with me. If what you just told me is the honest-to-God truth, and I believe it is, then this is what I think. He paused for a second, gathering his thoughts. What if that thing you saw in the forest is some type of alien? I scoffed at him and was about to walk out when he stood up and put out his hand. Hear me through first, please. I leaned back against the fireplace. What if during that meteor shower last week, this thing comes to Earth with one of those meteors that actually made it here, the ones that landed not far from here? This thing crawls out and starts wandering around. By chance, it makes its way to the farm. That would explain the railing being knocked over and the claw marks. You said that was a black He cut me off by holding up his hand. The thing stops in the forest to rest, maybe try to figure out where the hell it is. It runs into Gary on the mower. Maybe the sound of that mower threatens or scares it or something. It attacks, consumes Gary. That would explain why we couldn't find them. And if this thing now resembles one of our trees like you said, then it only had to blend in and stand still. We probably walked right by that thing several times and never even noticed it. It was at this time that I told him of the holes I had found. He stood up now and started to pace. The holes were from where it blended in with the other trees. It copied them to the T, even implanted itself in the ground, and when it was safe, it uprooted and moved somewhere else. The questions that now should worry us are, what happens if this thing decides to leave the farm and roam elsewhere? And how the hell are we going to stop it? Those were, no doubt, two hard questions he had asked. I dared not to think what would happen if this thing were to make its way out into town or somewhere not as desolate as the farm. The latter question, though, I had an answer for that one. Though the whole alien premise was hard to swallow, it explained a lot. Plus, it was something tangible that we could direct our energies to, instead of just confronting some unknown threat. It was at this point that I laid out my plan to Ingram. It was simple and foolproof. It only took him a few seconds to ponder the scheme I had laid out. It's going to cost you the farm, but I believe it's a solid plan, he had said. When did you want to get this started? Like yesterday, I quickly replied. And we're leaving the law out of this? I think it's best. Plus, they'll never believe your idea, and they'll more than likely haul me in as a murder suspect. Let's do this my way first, okay? Yeah, sure. Thanks, Ingram. I concluded with a forced smile and handed him the shotgun. Inside the storage shed sat a brand new 45-gallon tank sprayer that could attach to the back of the Ford. It was on sale this past November at Home Depot, and I scooped up the last one. The plan, as I had stated to Ingram, was simple. We would attach the tank sprayer to the back of the pickup, fill the tank with fuel from a 55-gallon drum, and drive around the forest through the firebreak road and spray the wood fence and the line of trees closest to the fence. Once that was completed, we would leave the front section where the dirt road led up to the house untouched. By igniting the fuel, a wall of fire would encircle the farm and start the trees up inside. Unless this thing was impervious to fire, its first reaction will be to beat feet out through the open section where we would be waiting to throw some hot lead in its face, if it had one. Plain and simple. Once we filled and attached the tank, we decided that I would drive the truck and Ingram would do the spraying. The hand wand had a reach of up to 30 feet, which would be more than enough to saturate the fence and trees nearby. It was just before 8 when I started the truck and slowly guided the Ford down to the forest. The sun had long passed its peak and was now edging close to the horizon. Shadows were awakening as night was taking stage and daylight was making its curtain call. As the truck crawled along the fence line, I leaned my left arm out the window alongside of the door, the 9mm in my hand in case our friend had an inclination of what was taking place and decided to intervene. Ingram moved the hand wand back and forth, soaking the fence and trees. The shotgun rested inside the truck bed. We made it around all 3 sides without incident. We had used most of the fuel with a few gallons to spare by the time we reached the end of the fence. I put the truck in park a few yards from the fence and hung out the window toward Ingram as he tossed a handle to the ground and was wiping his hands on his pant legs. "Might as well unhitch that tank, Ingram. Leave that fucker here. No sense driving around with it any longer," I called back to him. "Gotcha," he replied. As he was unhooking the tank, I gazed up toward the house and the dirt road that made its way up the hill. I guessed that parking the truck halfway up the road was probably the best position, not too close to the scorching heat that would soon come, and not too far where the thing could shoot off to the left or right when it came barreling out, leaving us without a shot. I looked at my watch, 7:44. The sun had already sunk behind the distant treetops with only remnants of its rays piercing the darkening skies. Stars already appeared and were laying claim to the night's upper regions. I heard the hitch hit the truck. The sudden bang startled me. I threw a quick look into the rearview mirror. "You need a hand with that?" I called. I couldn't see Ingram from the mirror's vantage point and leaned out the open window. "Don't throw your back out like I started to say, when I caught sight of Ingram's limp form laying on its back and being pulled into the tree line head first. A long appendage had impaled his torso and wrapped around his neck and face. It reeled him in with such force and speed that the lower rail to the fence snapped in two as it pulled his body through. His body bounced across the grass and vanished amongst the trees. I screamed with rage. Throwing open the driver's side door, I stepped out and opened fire into the trees. One of the rounds ignited the fuel, and even as the tree burst into flames, I continued firing until the magazine was empty and the gun locked in the open position. "You motherfucker! I'll be waiting!" I shouted my threat and hopped into the truck as the fire rose and enveloped the farm with unyielding speed. The tires spun in the dirt as I gunned the old truck up toward the house. The ball was in its court now. The rising flames were alive as they reached up high into the night sky, a spectacular display of flaming illumination that desperately reached up to touch the stars. The entire perimeter was now connected and sealed off by the wall of fire, all except the front portion, which I had intentionally left open. It would need an escape route, and it would be here where I would be waiting. I sat on the back of the Ford, the shotgun resting across my lap, as I patiently waited for it to make its escape from the hellish trap I had sprung. I took a drag off my cigarette and shifted on the tailgate. Come out, wherever you are," I said aloud in a singing tone. The entire forest was being engulfed before my very eyes. A whole acre of trees decimated by the raging flames. It wouldn't be long now. I only hoped that the fire department wouldn't show up before this thing came out. That would be a disaster on top of a disaster. I prayed that no one had caught sight of the flames just yet and made a call. Movement in the swirling smoke caught my eye. I watched more intently, making sure I wasn't witnessing some false trick being played upon my eyes. A shape then emerged from the choking clouds of billowing gray smoke and flames. The shape stumbled about as it made its way forward. The shape was that of a person. I spit my cigarette out and stood up, the shotgun leveled in front of me. The shape was most definitely that of a person. I could hear them choking as they awkwardly moved closer. The cough was that of a female. "Carrie!" I called out. The person fell to their knees as they retched. I lowered the gun and cautiously moved forward. As I neared, I could tell by the woman's torn clothing and her disarrayed short blonde hair that it was indeed Carrie. Somehow, she was not killed. I rushed to her side and helped her to her feet and slowly guided her to the truck. "I've got you. It's okay," I softly comforted her.
"The fire,"
she said between those retching coughs.
"I was unconscious under a tree.
She coughed harshly.
The heat woke me."
"What happened in there? Did you see it? Was it still in there?" I threw a glance behind me in case the thing had tried using this moment of distraction as its opportunity to flee.
"Where's Jeffrey?"
she asked. My gaze fell to the ground as my head bowed. With everything going on, I had temporarily forgotten about him. I started to cry. Carrie moved against me and wrapped me in her arms. Her fingers stroked my hair, her whispers hushing me not to cry. Her hands lifted my face and she kissed me deeply. I held her close to me. My life would have had no meaning without her and Jeffrey in it. She at least had survived. Wait. Something was wrong. Her grip on my face was tightening, her mouth pressing too hard against mine, our teeth grinding against each other's. I tried to speak and push myself from her, but her tongue was now swelling and pushing itself down my throat. Her grip on the sides of my face were like vices. My arms were being pinned to my sides as additional arms were tightly wrapping themselves against my chest and waist. The shotgun fell from my grasp. How could this be so if she was holding my face? I gagged as the thickening tongue was filling my throat and choking me as it pushed deep down toward my stomach. Our teeth gnashed, and I felt mine beginning to break into pieces. The arms were squeezing the air from my lungs with amazing strength. My eyes flashed open, and I looked straight into the morphing inhuman face, its red, bulging eyes growing from its sockets. It had now perfected shape-shifting into a human. God help us all, I remembered thinking, before everything went black. And that was Come Out Wherever You Are by our old pal Frederick Pangborn. A little about the author. Frederick Pangborn was a short story author with over 100 stories to his credit, and the majority of them in publication. He was a retired law enforcement officer and former U.S. Marine. And again, a special thanks to his brother Robert Pangborn, who's partnered with us to keep Frederick's legacy going. Robert himself is an amazing artist who we hope you'll check out. You can find him over at Facebook as R.F. Pangborn, simply spelled P-A-N-G-B-O-R-N, and at Pangborn RF at Instagram. His paintings are genuinely horrifying. Thanks, Robert, and thanks, Fred. Gone but never forgotten.
And do old Drew Blood a favor, would you? Subscribe to his podcast wherever you do your listening and leave him a 5-star review and a kind word, even if you're listening on YouTube. He needs soldiers on all fronts to win this battle, and he appreciates it. To hear a premium ad-free edition of tonight's and all the other episodes, visit simplyscarypodcast.com today and click Patrons in the upper menu. You'll find yourself at chillintalesfordarknights.com, where you can become a patron for as little as $5 per month and get access to their entire audio archive, all ad-free and available to download or stream. Thank you for your time and for supporting our sponsors. When you support our sponsors, you support this show. If you happen to use Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or YouTube, you can follow and subscribe to Chillin' Tales for Dark Nights there, where you'll get all the latest updates and new releases, and have the chance to interact with them each and every week. Oh, and you can find Drew Blood on Facebook and Instagram, and sometimes Twitter. The Drew Blood's Dark Tales podcast is accepting submissions, friend. If you've got a story or two you'd like to be featured on the show, send it to drewbloodhorror@gmail.com. If selected, you'll get the full treatment, 10 bananas.